Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us. And we have another in our investigative journeys about shooting for the grade. So thanks for spending this time with us. I'm Simon Walker. I'm Director of Training at Maxon, and we've got our usual color team of experts, Diego, Tony, and Maximus. Hi, guys.
Hey, Simon. Hey, everyone.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing?
And we're delighted to welcome Brian from Sigma, Brian Linhoff, who is a technical expert at Sigma, to help us with this journey navigating through lenses and how they can affect your grade and how they can make everything look better, essentially. So as you know, for these sessions, we're on a journey to kind of expand through the whole grading process, and in fact, the whole post-production process. So if you've been following along with us all last year as well, we do many of these sessions across different disciplines. So that's why it's so amazing for Brian to be joining us, because he keeps us honest, and actually when we go off message, and it's a great opportunity to think through that entire workflow about how you're doing things. So we're delighted to have you, Brian.
Thanks, Simon. I'm great. It's great to be here.
A couple of housekeeping things. Guess what? We're recording this. Yay! And as usual, you can find the recordings on our YouTube site. By the way, I'm on the Maxon events page, and so if you wanted to join any of the other sessions that we are on, like Ask the Trainer, which is coming up on Thursday week, where we just open it up to questions and we ask anything or answer any question you've got about any of the Maxon tools. But here's where you can find the recordings. You can find them on the YouTube site, Maxon Training Team. And here's a little tip. If you go to one of these recordings, here's last week's session, the second of the ones that we did with Canon. And we've got a whole series of links which allow us to share with you things like the actual files. Tony's very kindly shot he's shot loads and loads of footage for these sessions, but he's very kindly shared some of them as well, which is really cool. And also we've got links in here that you can download about further understanding and further information. And here's something that we put together, a little PDF, which I'll add to the handout section of this GoToWebinar software, which has got some more information about Sigma and some of their cine lenses and that sort of thing. So download the project files here and have a look at the Sigma site too. And just as a quick little reference, here's that folder. This is a Dropbox folder that we link to. And there's a whole range of shots. Here's some of the shots that Tony actually shared with us over the last couple of weeks that he's been shooting, and also these are some of the new ones that he went over the weekend. I believe as recently as last night that you shot some of these.
Yes, absolutely. That's another
Just in time.
story.
Just in time.
Absolutely. The commitment to this is amazing. We love it. So thank you.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And so this link will take you to this Dropbox page of all the different files, and Tony will share with you as we go through this hour what settings and what formats they are. And as usual, we talk about the different relationship between the compression and how you shoot, whether you shoot and record it from the camera or whether you've got an external recorder and so on. But this week, we're really excited to be talking about the role of lenses in the footage. Oh, one more quick piece of housekeeping. I think you might have seen this on the link right down at the bottom here. We also want to do what we have been doing historically at public sessions, where we can share a t-shirt with you in person. So because we can't do this at the moment, we just wanted to let you have a choose between the different styles that we've got and have a free t-shirt. So we got the link in that handout, and just put in the code demystifying and then you'll get a free t-shirt. Just one each, please, because we've got to share them out, and you only have to pay the shipping. I think it's $3 or $4 or €3 or €4 depending where you are.
We usually have a t-shirt cannon too.
Or $15 if you're in South America.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. So cool, great. And because we're talking about the role of lenses in the production process, and because we got Brian here, I thought it'd be a fantastic thing if we just found out a little bit about the background for Sigma. So if it's all right with you, Brian, can I hand over the screen for you and just give us a bit of background info and the kind of process of where Sigma is coming from in terms of the filmmaking process?
Yeah, so I mean, in the ancient past, the Sigma started at the the founder of Sigma, Michihiro, he started by he worked for a bunch of distributors and different lens manufacturers. Some of them went out of business quickly, and a bunch of his clients were like, hey, we need stuff still. So he ended up going to the business and making lenses, and that's kind of like the very, very, very basic of how Sigma got started. So take that, you progress it, 30, 40 years, and over that time we developed as a company that made lenses. We made some very good lenses, but we also made lenses, just everyday lenses for people to use on their 35 millimeter cameras. What happened about 2012 is our current owner, Kazuto Yamaki, took over the company, and he really wanted to kind of refocus us on how we went about our business and how we did stuff. So hopefully, there's many people out there that's used to it or familiar with it, is the Sigma art line. And so we kind of re-envisioned ourselves as a company. Some of it's kind of like marketing, some of it's to give you clear ideas when you're buying a Sigma product, what you're getting, right? So if I say you're getting a Sigma art lens, well, what is the specifications for that? What is the big deal about this? Kind of like when you go and buy Canon L lens, it's kind of like their top of the line. Well, the Sigma art line up to us is our top of the line. And in 2012, that's where it started. It kind of reimagined us or re-envisioned us as a company. And from that point on, we really just changed public perception. That we're here to we're here to large and in charge, and we're going to make amazing lenses. Within that time frame, for one of the first ones we wrote was the 35 art, and that lens is 8 years old now. That's kind of scary. I was working in a camera store when I was released, and a gentleman, one of the reps, gave it to me. He's like, "Hey, Brian, you got to try this." And I'm like, "Yeah, I got stuff to do this weekend. Yeah, I'll get it when I get around to it." He's like, "No, Brian, I really need you to try it." Okay, Rick, that's fine. I'll go try it. And then he couldn't pry it out of my dead hands after I shot it over the weekend. So, and that was like the real revelation. In my career, I went to work for Sony for a year and a half, 2 years, and then after the camera store, and then I moved over to Sigma, and I've been there about 6, 7 years since, and it's been amazing to watch us grow as a company. So the big lens that gets us into the cinema world is the 18 to 35. I'm going to guess hopefully a lot of you guys have shot it. Have you got, it's the lens. It was, to me, it's one of the most happy accidents that could happen. Is we wanted to make a lens that was different, and it was groundbreaking in the way it was designed. Nobody had made like a 1.8 zoom for like a Super 35 camera or APS-C, and so that's what we did, and it was really good. It wasn't just fast; it was optically amazing. And then filmmakers latched onto it. You'll see people running it around on GH5s with a speed booster. You'll see it on Canons. You'll see it on 7. You would see people running around with it like on the original 7D, then moving into some your original cinema cameras with EF mounts, C100s, and that. And that really showed us as a company the market potential of like cinema lenses and cinema products in general. And so that really involved us investigating the cinema lineup, and we've created from there a whole lineup of lenses, which is our high-speed primes. The 18 to 35 has progressed into a cinema lens. We've made the 50 to 100, which is kind of the counterpart to the 18 to 35. Those are both APS-C lenses or Super 35 lenses. From there, I was around when I helped start, in the States. I was one of the first guys to help, release the product. And it's taken off like gangbusters. I mean, we had built up a name with like indie filmmakers that had been using our still lenses, and they knew the quality of those lenses. So making them into proper cinema lenses, just, enhance that. They're amazing. They hit way above their weight for the price. And, if there's a reason why you might want, you can use a still lens, but there's a reason to use a cine lens, and there's a reason why you pay that extra money for them too. So
I think that's
did I hit the basics? I try not to go too long.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's interesting because we've been having, as you probably all can imagine, lots of nerdy chats about lenses before offline, and that's one of the key things about what the difference is between using a still lens and a cine lens and how it overlaps and how this merged and over time became a thing. So we'll definitely be diving into that. But you've been a huge fan, Tony, of the Sigma lenses for a while, and you've got a whole bunch of things that you've shot on different formats with it. So this, I mean, Tony is a major influence in what we've been doing this last month, because we're piggybacking off all his fantastic filmmaking skills. So it's not quite the Tony show, but it should be. We should retitle it. Let's show a few things. You've got a few setups of some of the shots. Let me hand the screen over to you, Tony.
And then I also have a question, Brian. I heard that you know, Sigma even makes the screws in factory for their lens in Japan.
So one of you know, I didn't want to go too long, but one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life is actually got to go to the factory, and we tried to make everything from the ground up that we possibly can make within our factory. That, you know, we make some specialty screws. We don't make all the screws, but some specialty screws. Everything we source from Japan. So the idea that, you know, it's truly, you know, it's there's this town in Japan in the mountains, Aizus, and, you know, we're one of the main industries, and the factory sits up there and they make everything. It's just so it's, you know, if you can go to our YouTube channel, you can find a couple things where they walk through the factory. I think it's like it's like a Japanese version of how it's made. You know, it's, you know, and, you know, somebody's hand painting, white painting the lines, and they actually do that type of stuff. It's crazy.
Wow.
But the cool, and we can actually see the difference too.
So. I'll leave one last thing. So the aperture blades are all painted black, and you know, everybody thinks black is black, but we all know that, you know, especially colorists know that black, there's like 18 billion shades of black. There's a lady that sits there and goes through and sorts them to make sure that the aperture blades are the right shade of black. And hand it's a little suction cup thing. It was just like, that's your job. That's amazing. I don't know if I could do that.
I love the process, and I got a lot of respect for, you know, in Japanese culture, there's a lot of process. There's a lot that goes into every little thing, and, you know, that's one thing that makes me a fan of something like this, where down to the screw is made in factory, you know. So
you know, if we can control all the tolerances, it lets us, you know, make a really, really tight tolerant product that you have to make such a good lens. So
awesome.
So I will showcase some clips here, and I will talk about the differences in some of these lenses, and then Brian will correct me when you know, when I'm kind of teeter-tottering here on the wrong answer. But I will give you my opinion first, and then, you know, that's why we have the expert in the room, and also Diego and Max will showcase some of these grades here. So I went recently and just literally as late as sunset yesterday, ran up the mountain with my assistant camera EJ, and kind of just literally ran up the mountain with the wrong shoes and all this stuff in Griffith Park, and grabbed a few sunset shots of downtown LA and stuff. And those are shared. Simon sent the link. I'm going to showcase some stuff that I've shot in the past with entirely Sigma, a combination of the cine lenses and the art lenses. When you're on a gimbal, you know, it's not always the best idea to go with a cine lens on the gimbal, depending on how big your camera is. So, you know, I do a balance between both, and it actually works, and they pair really well. So I'll show you a few things, and some things you should know between using the classic lens, the classic cine lens, and using the cine, just regular cine lenses, and the art lens. So the biggest thing is the flares that you would get from the classic are a lot different. You might see a little bit more of a muddy image. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you know, with the cine lenses, the flare is there, but it's not as robust. It's not like such a big thing like it is on the classic lens. A lot of the stuff that I have shot, I actually shoot into the sun sometimes because I love natural light leaks. So I will show. Let me. You can see my screen right now?
Yes, yes, we see
So
it.
just to show you, like, here's a classic example, not a classic as the lens, but here's an example of me just pointing slightly towards the sun, and you'll see, get some flares that'll just pop up here, but they're very controlled and they're a little bit more tame than you know, than what most people would like when you think of flare. But to me, I think that's perfect little transitional element. It washes out your shot. It's not too overbearing, and it has this really nice look to it. So I take my camera and I point it towards the sun just to get those natural light leaks. And I have, let me show you another example of that. And actually this right here is the setup when I'm not using the cine lens. I have it on a gimbal with that 30 millimeter 1.4 art lens. And of course I have a Metabones because this is a Blackmagic camera. So let's see right here. Here's an example of, you know, I'll purposely shoot with a flare. Here is the flare. And of course, these are log images. Keep in mind, you get a little bit of light leak, and then when you shoot into the sun, you'll get this awesome flares that pop up. Let's see, I got some that rim the hat here.
Not all lenses flare the same though. There's a
No.
kind of a strategy behind this, isn't there?
Yeah. So like if you see this subtlety actually adds a lot, you know, to the quality of what I'm trying to go for in this. If I had a big, huge flare, you know, if the flare looked any different than that, it would be almost uncomfortable. Like I would have to actually block it a few more times. You know, I do have a screw-on filter on this. I want to say it's a which one was it? It was the BW, or it might have been the well, anyway. But typically, you know, I like to shoot as wide open as possible at times. And, you know, getting a nice subtle flare versus something that's in your face that's going to cover half your screen, you know, to me, creates a different type of look. So for this, you have a little bit of light leak on the side. It's not taking over the whole image. And, you know, depending on who you're working with, I've heard where they just want you to reshoot it again. They don't like your flares. They don't like all this stuff. And I see people, you know, they go and experiment with flares, and then they have to go and reshoot it with no flare at all, maybe even at a different time of day, in the shade, away from the sun. So having subtle flare is a little more controllable, and you don't have this thing that's just obscuring your whole image. You have something that brings a little heat that kind of lights up your subject, but it doesn't completely just distract from the overall idea. So flares are hit and miss. I love to shoot with them, but I'm also, these are more subtle flares versus something that's just this big, huge flare that kind of obstructs your image.
I was just going to ask you, Brian, if you could weigh in on that, because that, when we were talking previously, it has a great kind of philosophy about the different looks for different lenses and how you can do different types of flares depending on which one.
So I mean, our original like cinema lineup is a very neutral. It controls flares a great deal. The lenses do come from our art lenses, and in photography in general, you don't want flares. So there's a lot of heritage in there trying to minimize flares. And so the lenses inherit that. They're not, obviously, you know, Tony's getting some nice subtle flares. They're not gonna be like all over the place, you know, just like throwing it, you know, throwing flares everywhere. And if you really, really want to get flares, that's where our classic lineup comes in. It's a little bit more, I would say, of like a rental house lens. You know, they're more expensive. We only sell them in set to 10, those type of things. But they are a lot. They're warmer. They're less contrasty, and they flare like nobody's business. So if you don't really, like on, I think you would agree with me on this, Tony. You could our art lenses and regular cinema lenses are really forgiving. You know, if for some reason, you know, you forgot the matte box and you decided to go shoot, you would be like, I wish I had that with me. But it wouldn't stop you from shooting because they control incidental light so well. If you forgot the matte box with the classics, you'd have to go drive an hour and go find it again because you just really need to control that incidental light coming into the lens, or you'll just have some type of like really crazy photo. So you know, I've been accused of it. So you know, the regular lenses somewhat make you a lazy shooter because they're so good. You make
Yeah, I would say it's like spice. You know, if you you know, if you like hot sauce, you know, but maybe you just can't take the habanero. You know,
Right.
maybe do the regular Tabasco.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a nice spice to your image, but you don't.
Yeah,
want
the
to be
classics really they make you be, if you want a good they may produce a beautiful image, but you have to be technically very sound to use it and not just have a hot mess. So
We got a
also
quick
maybe
question in from Lester, just whilst we're on this topic, who shoots a lot of motorsports and landscapes, and is just interested to see if you're shooting those, which lens would you recommend, or which type of lens?
I would, you know, if you're shooting, you know, I would originals, you know, they're just a little bit more poppy in color. The sharpness, there's you know, just the art lenses. If you're, you know, if you're just doing landscapes, you could probably get away with the art lenses. But if you're doing some, you know, stuff like, you know, with motion and people, the cinema lenses lend themselves to that. You know, the focusing capabilities, the bigger focus throw, being able to put, you know, follow focus on it, all those type of things help towards that. So, you know, I personally, I would go with the regulars. The classics, you know, they're definitely, if you were, I think of the classics is like a period style. You know, if you want, you know, say you're, I don't know, say you're shooting a drama in present day, but you have some flashback, you know, This or Us. They should use the classics on This Is Us. When they flash back to the 70s, they need to use the classics. You know, and then in the modern day, they use the regulars. And then that's the way they're being used in productions right now. So, I mean, they have a definite look and feel to it. There's the classic debate of, you know, do you add that look in post, or, you know, or do you bake it into your footage? So I won't argue, since, you know, obviously you do it in post, since I'm looking at you guys in front of me. So
The answer is it depends.
oh, okay.
depends on your
That's
team,
our
who you're
best
working
answer.
with, what's your turnaround time too.
Yes. Yeah. I
So I
mean,
think
obviously,
if you have something on your mind, if you have a specific look on your mind that you don't need to do so much in the post productions, I think it's better to go with a classic lenses, right? And
yeah.
then if you want to massage the image a little bit in the post productions, I think that's where you can get like a more sort of neutral, you know, image with a cine lenses.
You know, perfect world, you know, the DP is talking to you guys to kind of come up with a scheme or look and feel, and you guys work together. We know that doesn't always happen, but, you know, that's, you know, I think the classics can make your work easier. You don't have to, you know, work so hard on the back end to get that look, you know.
Yeah.
In terms of texture and sharpness, would you say cine or?
So they're both equally sharp. Where a lot of people, so this is where it gets a little technical, I guess, is the traditional the high speed primes, the art lenses are more contrasty. And so your eye detects contrast as sharpness, but they're actually, if you actually would pixel peep and like pull in it, the classics don't have quite as much sharpness, or I mean, as much contrast, so they don't look quite as sharp. But if you were, you know, the pixel peep in and zoom in on, like, say, this eye, you could still count every single hair, because they're the same sharpness. The two lenses use the exact same optical formulas. Where you're seeing the difference in color and look is actually just through the coatings. So it's pretty, you know, that's the main difference, is they put different coatings on the two different lenses.
Some people actually like to shoot soft, like cinematic is not as sharp, like video sharp, really super crisp, and then cinematic more subtle, more soft, more blooming. Right.
And
like,
yeah, totally. I mean, it's so the high speed primes, and, you know, like the 18 to 35 or zooms and such, a lot of people will take those and, you know, filter them, knock the sharpness down on them. I mean, that's one of the nice things about the lenses in general, is if you own a set of them, or you own the lenses, you can take them. And I always say you can go shoot a German car commercial, because it's nice, crisp, you know, very clean, crisp. Or you can take them in, you know, with the right type of, you know, filtration or whatever, you can knock down that sharpness and create another look. It gives you a good solid base to work any which way you want. So
yeah. we've had a couple of questions in, actually. One of those interesting one, TJ's asking, are there any online or in-person resources for visual lens comparisons? And it's interesting telling the difference between them. I think we've got a couple of examples of that, what we're going to show as we go through as well. And in a second, Tony, I'll ask you about which particular lenses you're using on these shots that you're showing. But just a quick one, Paolo has asked, this is for you, Tony, since you've shot with Blackmagic stuff, how, if you shoot wide open in a gimbal, how do you control focus if the Blackmagic doesn't have autofocus?
So I have trained myself to the point where I know something is 6 feet away. So I am willing to kind of either stay my distance. Mind you, you're seeing stuff that's edited, so you're not also seeing the like in and out of focus. When I'm doing something and I really want to have a narrow focus on, I know something 6 feet, I stay within 6 feet. I've trained myself to kind of almost look over my camera at times and just kind of grab that shot. You know, the autofocus thing is great when you have the Canons and, you know, all the newer cameras, and that's becoming a thing. When you're using the cine lenses, you don't really have autofocus, right? So, you know, for me, I just kind of understand my distance between myself and the subject, and, you know, or I'm on sticks. But anything on a gimbal, I'm literally, if that focus is set for 6 feet, I'm literally I'm visually watching over the lens to make sure that I get that. And there's, you know, my rule of thumb is that there's a sweet spot in every shot. So I just overshoot. You know, there is definitely some throwaway in some of my footage, but I'm going for something. I'm going for those sweet spots, if that makes sense.
Got it, absolutely. So what are you using in the shots that you're showing here?
This one I definitely have some ND on for sure. This one is this on the gimbal? No, this one I think is the 50. If it's not the 30, it's the 50. So I brought on this trip, this was July 2019 when I was actually traveling. By the way, I barely left my house since going to Griffith Park or Joshua Tree. So you know, this in particular, I want to say is a 50. And you know, I just have it on sticks so I can get shallow depth of field, and you know, I can just really dial that in and I'm not moving anywhere. But I went out there with the 35, out there meaning Thailand, in the middle of nowhere Thailand, not just Bangkok, and shooting on a farm where there's dust and dirt and grit and all this good stuff. So you know, those cinema lenses are really tough. So I literally, not that I'm throwing them or tossing them in the dirt, Brian, but you know, for what they are, I can capture a lot. They're really tough, and they're not gonna, you know, just fall apart. They're not plasticky.
Right.
The art lens, you know, the art lens I use on the gimbal a lot, and so I pair the primes, and I have the Cine Prime, the 135. I mean, sorry, 18 to 35. For some of these other shots. So this one right here in particular is the 50. I had a lot of really interesting shots with just the 50, just kind of getting people doing some work, doing some gardening, and I was able to get some really crisp shots with that. So, but this one in particular is the 50.
Quick follow-up question to the flares. Fred is asking, how does the aperture affect the shape and the amount of flare? Or is it flare? Very nice pun, like it.
I mean,
is it blade? Was it round, hexagon, pentagon, those sorts of shapes?
I want to say it's more round, but I don't really. What I see is it kind of warms up areas versus giving you a huge flare that comes across your screen. That's the beauty of it. Like,
Yeah.
if you're looking for that, then that's more of the classic, I would say.
Yeah. So in general, the bokeh is going to be round and circular. That's the way the aperture is designed. If you start stopping down, it will get less round. That's just the nature of the beast. If you go all the way to f16 or T16 or so, then you'll start getting starbursts. That's just the way the aperture works, and how you kind of get those. But in general, they're very soft flares. The classics is going to be a lot more bloomy and yeah. So like, yeah,
So
we're
this
very
kind
controlled.
of stuff, you can kind of warm up a side of your image. You know, you can create nice light leak without it kind of bleeding over with a huge flare that pops up. So these are
yeah. So
subtle.
to me, that's very pleasing, and it isn't distracting. So I think you have to really be careful in using flares, and that's one thing that's nice about the Sigmas is it control. No matter how hard you try, you're always going to have somewhat of a controlled flare. So even if you're your own worst enemy, you kind of cut you back a little bit.
There's nothing worse than if you shoot people, right? You're shooting like images of people, and then a big flare across that person's face is just going to make whatever producer or director just want to do it again.
Yeah.
It's not always a desire.
Or add more, depending on the producer.
Yes.
Or delete it in post.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
So, again, I can get textures, I can get these wonderful textures, and then I can get a little bit of bloom in there. It's almost like you're adding it in post, like you're adding that nice little glow in the background there. So you can make things glow without putting a big, shape across your image. And, for me, subtle flares kind of just warm up the image. And that's how I like to use them, especially whenever you use this styles of lenses here. You're going to get something subtle and something that acts kind of like a transitional element, a nice light leak, versus something that's just this big, either intentional or, it's a distraction. But that's, keep in mind, baked into your footage.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have subtlety baked into my footage than a big right across.
So how hard is it for you guys? Like, so let's say somebody gives you something like, oh, I don't know how often you guys get this when you're on the post end, half the stuff was shot with Canon lenses, half the stuff was shot with Sigma lenses. How much work is it for you to blend everything together so that it looks like they're shot with the same lenses?
That's actually, it's really, really a great question, and I will answer. In most of the cases, we worry about the camera, and I say Diego colorist, we worry about the camera, and we don't ask about the characteristic of the lenses. And that is something that I will invite everyone that is listening to us is, hey, ask what the lenses or the characteristic or what they use, because in most of the cases we match it with different techniques, but we don't know what they use. So probably if we have a clue about, okay, these lenses give a little bit of blooming, this one is more sharpened, we definitely can have a better way to start matching that kind of scenes. But we are blind. We're blind, but it's because of us. We don't ask. And in my case, I can say I ask about the camera. I never ask about the lens. But now,
the cameras definitely make a big difference on the way they do, but the lenses will too. So if somebody's shooting a whole project, you'll make your colorist's life easier if you're using obviously I want you to use Sigma lenses, but if you're shooting Canons, Canons all have a certain type of look and feel, or even Zeiss or whatever. If you use those lenses within there, you'll make the post go a little bit faster and easier, and just because everything will have that same look and feel. So
and also one of the things that I believe also is that all of that effects that is making Tony on set is so difficult to make it on post. It's really, really difficult. It's really, really difficult. I always think if you make it on set, it's a decision that you have to compromise yourself, and that will be till the end. That is something that is going to be, because there is no more dangerous, or the worst thing is when they ask you, can you delete that flare?
Rule of thumb on that is get the shot that's desired first, get it clean, and then go artistic. Like don't go artistic. If you go rogue and you do that, you might not get hired again. So go and get the flares after you go and get the regular shot, proper exposure, proper everything, and then get the dirty version of that for yourself. And maybe they pick yours, and it's just literally like a lottery at that point.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
Side question for you, Brian. Gianni, feel free to talk more about this. I just wanted to throw in questions as people are asking them as well. But Gianni is a commercial photographer shooting on Nikon and is now using a Z6. So he's asking the Z mount question. Will you,
I don't know when those will arrive or if they will arrive. That's standard. I'll cut off R mount right here too. I don't know when R mount's coming. They don't tell me anything. So if I did know and I told you, I'd get fired. So there's your answer.
TBD.
I like my job. So yeah, my guess is that they were working on it in some capacity or another. I have no idea when anything will come out. The world's definitely moving to mirrorless as far as still cameras and even cinema cameras. You know, you have the FX6, FX9, which are basically just E-mount cameras, FS7s. You know, those are all there. Even if you move into higher end cinema cameras, like the Red Komodo or Ari Alexa, can't think, the Ari full frame camera with the LPL mount. That's pretty much just a mirrorless mount. So, you know, just very shallow distance. So.
Yeah, Johnny doesn't want you to lose your job either. Neither do we. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So the world's moving there. It's great to see. Well, I worked for Sony when they released the original A7s, and I was like, this is so amazingly revolutionary. But telling people they had to use an adapter to, you know, autofocus all their lenses wasn't great at the time. But you know, it's definitely come its way. You know, we start. You know, Tony, I have a new lens for you.
Ah. What is this one?
Super small for your gimbal. It's part of our new series of lenses. It's called the I series. So it's they're super small. They're made for E mount and L mount. So you know, but
I have a
they're
question on autofocus with that. Like Sony and their new line is really heavy on autofocus. How well does that work? You know, E mount wise to like the F. Have you seen it with an FX6 yet or an FX9?
I have not yet. I haven't had a chance to get my hands on them yet. That's something to test. I'll be honest with you. So
Yes.
yeah,
that's what we're looking to do in the near future, FYI.
Okay. When you need something, call me. I'll send you some stuff.
Absolutely.
Are we interrupting your private call, you two?
Oh wait, sorry. Simon, can you tell something interesting, please?
So here's
This is great.
I'll show one or two things here, and then I'll hand it over to Diego and Max.
Yeah.
That sounds good. We've got, just keep in mind, we've got a side question. In fact, this could act as a good segue after you show your stuff, because Greg's asking an interesting question about the best pairing for Sigma lens and camera bodies. And we've also been thinking about what a good pairing is for sensors, so that we've got that discussion coming up, Greg, but I just wanted to seed that if everyone's thinking about it over the next few minutes whilst Tony's showing his stuff.
I would say, you know, like a couple of these right here were shot with the Sigma FP, and I used the external recorder. Not the most, you know, ergonomic situation, not the easiest situation, you know, especially running on battery power, and you got now like 6 different batteries to worry about. But you know, Blackmagic, you know, I have to use a converter to get it on there as well when I'm using the 4K versus the 6K. So, you know, combinations of mounts and combinations of converters, definitely, I wouldn't say they degrade your image. Sometimes they'll give you a little boost. The one that I have in particular is the booster, the Metabones situation. Even Canon has their own, you know, booster. So that's pretty common. What I do here, let me just talk about these while I have these on the screen, and we can segue and I will hand it over. But this right here is an example of the classic, and you can see, if you see all these lights here blooming, all these little small lights. And is it ideal that I use a 35 to get all of you know, all of downtown from a hill? No, it's not. But what I had was a PL mount lens and one PL mount, and it only went to the Sigma FP that I had. So I was testing it with what I had. Otherwise, I would have the 135, but I didn't have a 135 Classic. So in here, just to show you, look at all this blooming highlights here, right? And this is, you know, of course, nighttime shot, but look at all the blooming highlights here with this classic lens. And it just gives you a different look compared to when you look at some of the other stuff. You're not going to get that same bloom. So even here, I literally just the observatory, you can see everything's kind of blooming here in the highlights. So, but let's see if I have here one more. These are the different, like this is as the sun was going down here, but you can still see even here, you can see the bloom and all those little lights kind of just turn into this nice subtle blooms.
So just remind us, which exact lens are you using to get this blooming effect?
Sigma 35 Classic. So I have it, I even put it in the name of this on purpose.
Oh, cool.
Just to remind myself. So, but yeah, the idea is, you know, this is a very stylized, you know, way of shooting when you use those lenses. And like Brian said, it's a rental house lens, meaning like you're not just going to go out and buy it because it comes in a kit. And, you know, what did you say it was 10 lenses?
Yeah, it's 10 lenses. So, I mean, if you want to buy a kit and, you know, go, I mean, it's a specific tool, but built for a specific purpose.
So,
yeah,
you know, versus when you buy the Cine lens, you can buy the Cine lens one by one.
Yeah,
right?
and even Cine lenses, you know, the entry point on those to me really is our 18 to 35 and a 50 to 100. And I mean, those are great bang for your buck zooms if you want an actual Cine lens. So I think you've used those in the past, haven't you, Tony?
I definitely have quite a bit. The 18 to 35, a lot actually. So I want to hand this off to Diego and Max so they can, you know, actually show you what this can do in post and actually show you what we're working with here. I did a lot of low light stuff, but I think it's not my opinion at this point. It's the colorist opinion to see what he's able to grab. I gave him the dough and he's the one that's kneading the dough. So I'll hand it over to.
Well, I'll just send it over to Diego. Whilst I'm doing that, Brian, I'm always interested in the noise conversation, and when we're talking about noise and versus light and so on. What would be your key pro tip or your things to look at if you are trying to reduce noise in terms
Buy a more
of
expensive camera. I'm just kidding. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, the lenses don't have too much bearing on the on noise. So I mean, obviously shoot the fastest lens you possibly can to get as much light in. As far as different cameras are going to have different noise characteristics, obviously. You know, Sony's made a fortune off making a camera that can shoot what our eyes actually can't see with like the A7S. So I think that is, you just have to choose the right tool for what you're trying to do if you have that budget. So, and then, you know, I think the guys in post can talk better. So I think one thing, let me back up just a sec. I think one thing is video is a lot more forgiving on noise than still photography. And the main reason for that is your image is moving, so you don't have time to sit there and analyze and look at grain pattern, noise pattern, pixel peeping. Whereas if I go out and I shoot a starry night, and you know, and it's one image, or maybe it's a stack of images I put together, it's still on my screen just one image, and I'm staring at it and I'm seeing noise all over the place and grainy. Do the exact same thing, but I do a time lapse, and I don't notice it as much because it's moving and it's constantly shifting and my eyes just don't focus on it. So I think there is something that, you know, cinema cameras and video cameras in general are a lot more forgiving, not because they give you better results, it's just the nature of the medium. So
yeah. I have one quick thing about noise. Like, so in post, you actually, when you make an image look so great and you remove the dancing colored pixels, like so all the pinks and all the greens and all these pixels that are like less desirable, and you make your image look a little soft, you actually end up wanting to add some like more film noise, add some more grain,
right?
And it gives so there is desired noise, there is you know, but just not the dancing pixels.
Yeah, so you don't want ugly digital noise. You want pretty film noise.
Pretty noise, not bad noise.
Black and white noise. Yes, it's not color noise.
This is interesting because this is Tony's hinting at some of the things that we're doing on week 4, where we're diving in. We've been talking about the process a lot over these first 3 weeks, but in the 4th week we're going to dive in and do some stuff from scratch and show you a whole post process, including the ability to get rid of noise and then add in film grain. So that was a nice little teaser. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, and also what I want to say is that Tony is recording great images, and he usually send it to us like, I mean, like one day or something. So what we were talking with Tony is we are going to make a really nice reel, like grading that images, because I mean, it deserves. The images are so good that in my case, for example, I just have a few hours like to take them and to color it. We really want to make a nice reel showing our experiments and our, I mean, what we are living it.
Because not every single one can make the cut to be here on Monday morning. I literally shot last night, and you know, even stuff, he's showing some stuff from last week that we shot on the C300. And actually, I don't know if you got that one with the mountain, the side of the mountain, the little guy with the flashlight on the 135 Sigma. You can still see the flashlight and the guy's shape in the mountain from hundreds of feet away. So it's in there somewhere, I want to say.
Yeah. Okay, so going in my case, the first thing, as I told you, it was like, okay, Diego doesn't know so much about lenses. So the first thing that I thought is like, okay, I have to learn about lenses. So now after this webinar, probably my questions are going to be, okay, what camera did you use and what lens do you use? Because based on that, my grading will improve. Definitely. So right now is something that I will ask to my clients and the DPs. So then I was like thinking, okay, we live in a world of metadata. And in most of the cases, we don't have like the person, like the DOP next to us, like for asking about or for saying what is the camera and so on. So I was like, my first question is, are these lenses come with metadata that I can take advantage in grading? So when I select, for example, these shots, and if I go to the metadata menu at the top right, and then I select camera, so what I notice is that I have a full of metadata. I have the camera. If I move more, I have the ISO shooter. Then I have the lens type, and then I have the aperture, the focal length. So this is a really valuable information because in some way I feel that if I have a noisy shot, then I know why. In some of the case because of the ISO or for the aperture.
Well,
so
you
it's
can
good.
provide feedback to, camera department, and I'm sure they'd love to hear it.
Yes, definitely. And probably will not be my fault. I can say to him, hey, look, I have the details of how you shoot.
Well, you can never judge. I'll add two quick things. First of all, the mount is very important. If it's not a native mount, you're not going to get that data. And Brian had something to say about, Top Gun. All right, but I'll leave that towards the end. But part of it is having that metadata is actually having a mount that has the chip in it that transfers the data electronically. If you're using stuff like I have the PL mount I have does not transfer metadata. So it will say the same aperture through and through, and it's not correct. And if I'm wide open and then it says that it's not, it's because you don't have the proper mount and it doesn't transfer electronically. So make sure you have the chip
Yes.
in any of the mounts that you use or native mount.
Yes, that's really important. And based on that metadata, what I wanted to show you really fast is, okay, why not to take this metadata to name the clips? Because, I hate when the clips are A00C. I mean, I don't know if you guys hate it, but I hate it so much.
Definitely.
So one really good tip is in Resolve, if you have all of this metadata, you can select all of your clips, right click, then go to clip attributes. And in clip attributes in the clip name, you can say, okay, what I want to see. I want to see, in my case, as a colorist, not that editor one, another information. As a colorist, probably I would want to see like, okay, camera manufacturer. Also, what I would love to see, why not, is the lens. So here I have lens type. And based on that, if I go click, okay, look, really fast, I have the camera, the name of the camera and the lens. So I have a lot of information right now, like to start grading, or at least to know what I have. And if I go to the edit, look, I have already my timeline, and then I can make some other filters. For example, base it, if I move here, on the aperture. And this is exactly what I was like thinking. It's like, okay, if I have this information, camera aperture, can I take it in my advantage? So in the color page, here in the clips tab, you can select or you can create smart filters. So for example, let me show you really easy how to create it. So for example, this one is going to be like FS5, for example, the stop 5, and then you select camera, and here you have camera aperture. Let me see, wait. There you go, camera aperture type. And if you select, I don't know, 5, let me just 5.6 or 2, I think was it.
Maybe try
Okay.
putting an F in front of it.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the thing. I already created, because you know, in a demo we always create everything before.
Yeah. Cooking
So
show.
for example, here, if we check what I did in this part, that is like the, let me just, the 5.6, it's like I put this name, then I put camera aperture is 5.6, and it's showing me like the clips with that camera aperture. So in this case, for example, if I have many of that ones, probably I will put it all of them like next to each other. And if they are in the same scenario, the setting that I have graded here probably will be really similar in the other shots, because they are recording with the same, like with the same aperture. And another experiment that I was like doing is like, for example, here I made one with 2. And in this case, you can notice that, I mean, it's 2, so that's the reason that is noise. There are a lot of noise. And this is the kind of noise that we don't want, that we will cover next week. But I was thinking, hey, if I create this filter, 2, I will Resolve will organize me so fast, like all of the shots, so I can go like in every shot and I can apply like a noise reduction, and will be easier than to have a full timeline with 700 shots and then start like looking at them and selecting each one individually. So this information from the metadata is helping me a lot for that organizing. Also, I can organize by ISO, and I found it really interesting in that way. So talking about the shots, for example, that Tony did, in this case, this is Cine lens. Let me just put it in full screen. Do you see it in full screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So there is a lot of detail, especially in the clouds, in the highlights, what I noticed, and also here in this part. It's really nice. And when we were talking about, I want to show you also here, these shots that are really nice of the city. I was impressed about this. I love this shot. Just it's a beautiful shot. I don't know, Tony, can you tell us about the details of how you record this shot?
This is with the 135 prime cine lens. Literally, you could see the whole outline of the moon and the texture of the moon. I mean, if I had a longer lens, it would probably be like full frame and super crisp. But for what that is, to get the moon as clean and clear as that, I mean, and it's like it has a nice bloom to it. It's not blown out, and it's not just these two blurry shapes. So
Yes, and it's not so noisy. That is the good thing. It's really difficult to get that kind of shots without noise.
it's at like
So here I have,
at night, and the sun is already down completely. So
yes, it's beautiful. This is really beautiful. And also what I was like testing about what Tony was saying to me, I mean, because it's good when they're saying to you, okay, it's giving you more blooming or more sharpen and so on. So I wanted to test it. And I have here like, not here, wait, was it? It's this one. I have here like these shots. The first one, this one is with the cine lens. And I have a good definition, a good as Brian says, it looks like it was shot yesterday, something like that. Like right now, like in the present. And I found also that a similar shot, really similar, this one was with the classic. And as Tony say, I found that blooming. And for example, if I try to exaggerate it, like that blooming in color, I can find a really that good texture that is giving me, hey, for example, this is like from the 80s or something like that. So it was really interesting, like to test that part. And I will say, if I have more metadata, I can take advantage of that metadata to grade fast. As I told you here, like creating this like smart filters per aperture probably will help me with the matching, and also with the difficult cases when I need to apply like a noise reduction or something like that. What I will love that I still don't have it and is a Resolve, I don't know, let's hope update, is I will love to see all of this metadata that I'm having in the media page in the color page. Right now, the metadata information in the color page is so little. And also what I found is that, okay, I have Tony and I can call Tony anytime. But here I have lens type, but I don't know if it's cine, if it's the classic, or if it's the art. So will be nice, like something like lens series. So if I don't have the DP next to me, I can Google it and I can have like the best characteristic of that lens, take advantage for that lens in the image, something like that.
If only you knew somebody at Blackmagic, you could ask them.
Yeah, already.
You only knew somebody there, Diego.
That's
Yeah,
right.
no, and
That's
actually
request.
something that I found is that colorists don't use metadata. Never don't use metadata. So this is a really good way, like to accelerate your grading. Use all of this metadata and to create better results. It's perfect here, and also to create these smart filters I created, and it's probably you spend a little bit more time before grading, but this time you will be, this time will be come back for you when you are grading and you make these filters really fast,
Also,
and you go to specific shots.
you can make combination filters. So you can say, this was C300 using the 135, so that now it's C300 and 135, not
Yes.
just 135. And then the 135 on the Blackmagic too. So you can make a combination one. So now you can also separate based on camera make, model, with lens. So now, because each sensor has its own characteristics as well.
Yes, something that is really interesting, but I will invite you to everyone, like if you have a lot of metadata and now the lenses have a lot of metadata, they are giving you is for your own good, it's for your workflow, is to make you faster and to make your image better.
Absolutely. I'm been biting my tongue, but I'm so intrigued about this, especially with that tease about Top Gun. What's he talking about, Brian?
So, making sure you hear me. I muted myself for a minute there. So PL mounts, the REPL mount, there's been a progression in that into what we call /I, and the lens manufacturer Cook created a metadata protocol called I technology or /I that allows you to, on a PL lens, push that data to the camera. So our original PL cinema lenses do not, they're like they're what we call passive mounts. There's no metadata coming through them. Going back a little bit, I was in New York. I distinctly remember this day. And I get a phone call like I do. I don't recognize the phone number. I answer a lot of robocalls because my job requires me just to answer phone numbers because I get sometimes random calls, and I'm like, and I go, hello? He's like, this is Claudio. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, great, what can I do for you? And basically, it was Claudio Miranda, DP for Top Gun, and he had just tested our lenses, and he loved them. And he was, he's like, the conversation that happens at Waste like, they're so good. Why aren't they more expensive? And I'm like, well, I can make it more expensive for you if you want, if it makes you feel better. But no, I didn't say that. But and so he was interested in testing more of the lenses to use on Top Gun 2. He ended up deciding to go with the lenses, but one of the keys to it is he had to have metadata. Obviously, Top Gun has a lot of visual effects, so the more metadata he can get, the easier it is in post to especially do when you're using visual effects. So the lenses he tested didn't have that metadata. So Japan basically prototyped lenses with the Cook/I data so he could get metadata, and he would use the lenses on Top Gun. And that research and quick turnaround and that prototyping of that type of stuff led us to creating all our new PL lenses do have the /I technology. So if you do have a camera that will read the /I data, you will get the metadata in your camera in your footage from the PL lenses, basically. So moral of the story is answer all your phone calls, and
Very cool.
Yeah, and also what I have to add is, yes, we know that in many cases that metadata goes to VFX, but why not to use it in grading? That's the main question.
Yeah, the visual effects. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the stuff you get from the /I data is a little more comprehensive than what you get from, say, your traditional metadata from like a still lens. Like, it'll tell you your f-stop, and the /I will actually tell you what distance you are focused at and how much depth of field you have and things like that, which really helps for especially visual effects. You can make that footage look more realistic. Yep. So.
Mathematically accurate composites.
Yes. That's way above my pay grade.
That metadata and the workload for that is so important. Greg and Adrian are just weighing in on the questions about that. Not only is that a hugely useful trick, Diego, but it's having that ability to have that information at your fingertips without having to pick up the phone and ask Tony. Then that's the key thing.
Yep.
Just noted the time, by the way, and those of you who are regular attendees will know that we never overrun, except when we overrun. So the thing is that we don't necessarily just want to clamp it down when we got some interesting things to share, and Max has got some nice examples of taking this footage and exaggerating what the inherent nature of the lenses is giving you. So that if you're watching the recording, we'll just run for a few more minutes, but if you're live, that's what we're going to do as well. So that it's always a balance about cutting off too soon and just adding in some extra info. So thank you for bearing with us. And I just wanted to say, Max, there's no need to race through this. I'm sure it won't take too long, but
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
There we go. A handful of minutes. But it's interesting because we want to kind of suggest the creative process and hint on some of the things that we're going to dive in more deeply next week when we go into a full session on the grading. So let me hand over the screen to you, Diego. Sorry, Max. Here we go. Make you presenter. And thank you, everyone, by the way, for your questions as we're going through. It's really useful because it's so many different ways to do these productions, so that anything that we can help and answer live, especially when we've got experts like Brian with us, the more we can do to help, the better.
Yes.
So yeah, I deliberately jumped the process and jumped into week 4 already. Sorry, guys. Before TJ was asking, how can I differentiate like the look of the standard lenses and the cine lenses, and Brian has kindly sent us some picture that he took that describe the real represent the look of the characteristic of the lens. So if you're looking at my screen at the moment, we have a pictures that was taken by the classic lenses, right Brian?
Yes.
And as you can see, the image, the softness and everything, it has that character, which obviously I cannot, put it in words. But if you see the next image, look how sharp the flower is, the subject. And this was taken with the standard lenses. And
Correct.
what more obvious to that is like when you are having a flares into your shot. And as you can see, the flares, it has some characteristic. And I'm sorry, yeah, of course, I use colorista in there, sorry. But yeah, this is the unmodified versions. So, I mean, for me, the far that I would touch this image, would do a retouch for this image, is only just to add some contrast and saturations, and that's it. And I will not try to remove the flares or compensate it, because it's part of the image. It's part of the look. It's already embedded to your footage. So the best suggestions for me for post process is that just to embrace the flares and accentuate it and make it looks good.
Yes.
And here I would like to show you the how do you call it, the thought process when I approach the footage when color grading it. And here, this is a footage that was shot with a C300, right, Tony, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, this
And it is a raw footage, and as you can see in the raw footage, you have the raw control panel that you can play around with the temperature and tint. I mean, of course, you can also go to your effect panel and put some lumetri color or colorista to affect the temperature and tint. But let me show you what's the difference when you are affecting the temperature and tint with after the raw, or in the raw control panel itself. So for example, if you take a look in the vector scope there, if I am adding some temperature, messing around with the temperature sliders, you can see that the data is moving along the I-bar lines over there. And also same with the tint. It kind of move linearly. And in Colorista, I found out that similar behavior also appear, right? And in the tint, but, so let me delete Colorista. But in the raw control panel, if you play around with the color temperature, it kind of move off axis. It has a different behavior, and it kind of pivot in the center. And it's more obvious if I'm playing with a tint slider. Sorry, my slow computer.
Takes a little bit to update, yeah.
So as you can see, it's not moving along the axis, but it's slightly off axis.
Yeah.
So for my money, I will use the temperature and tint control in the raw control panel, and then after that do further adjustment in the effect panel afterward. So let me just reduce the color temperature.
And what I feel also
Is
is
it
more
crashing?
natural. It's more natural. It's not like applying a yellow or a
Yeah.
magenta filter in front. It's like it's
I'm
going
sorry, guys. Did you see that?
crash. Nice.
many times. Don't worry.
Demo without a crash.
Sorry,
I don't feel
guys.
so bad now.
All right. I'll add one thing about doing it when you use the raw profile. It's basically like repainting the image that was just captured raw from the sensor, so you have all of that
Yes.
to work with. Versus, when you're working on using a color tool, it literally will be a little bit more trained versus you're repainting what that image is pre-process. So that to me is the major difference between when you're painting that image using the raw settings versus going into a color treatment.
Yeah,
So
this is
with
the
the
key concept.
with the magic of
Yep.
Safe project, I already have my color temperature set and my tint set. So magic.
No one noticed, Max. You're fine.
No one noticed. Yes.
Yes.
And here I will just proceed into adding look on top of that and also balancing my image. So let me, instead of how do you call it, balance it in Colorista and add a look on top of that, I will just use Magic Bullet Looks to do both inside Magic Bullet Looks. And the first thing that, if Magic Bullet Looks launch, yes, the first thing that I will do is that to find a correct gamma curve that looks nice to my eyes, and I like the log gamma curve more because it gives me more contrast.
Yeah.
And then after that, I can also adjust the exposure a little bit, not too much. Something like that, or maybe even more. Yes. And we are outputting this footage to sRGB or Rec 709. And yeah, I will balance my footage by adding Colorista on top of that. So Colorista will be the first tool in my chain. And I kind of play with my contrast a little bit and adjust my highlight, make it more brighter, and darken my black area a little bit, and my highlight, my midtones. Okay, I kind of like that. And before I move on and adjust my saturations, I will try to target the how do you call it, the targeted saturations by using the set by loom or set by sat the EQ sliders. So I will just reduce the saturations in the shadow a little bit and reduce the saturations in the less saturated area by doing this. And then on top, and after that, I will use the saturation slider to increase the saturations. So as I can see, this is like a sunset shot. So you have like some magenta color cast, and I want to accentuate that. And to accentuate that, I can also play around with temperature and tint, but I already kind of do that previously in the raw control panel. So I will just take a deliberate approach and do it creatively by just using a color blend. And I will just use my color filter and put it into magenta, but I will not put it after Colorista. I want it to be more obvious, and I'll put it before Colorista. And as you can see, it has that sunset look, if you like. But this area over here on the top right is a little bit bothering me because it's a little bit too bright, too how do you call it, too white and less colorful. So before moving on, I think I can tackle that image, tackle that area later on when I finish my look inside Magic Bullet Looks, and I'll tackle that separately using Colorista. So now I will just move on and proceed with my looks. I will use Unity to unify all the hues of the green foliage. So I will just use Unity, pick the green foliage over there, and target my area. I will not target the red. I will target more of the green and kind of shift the hue a little bit somewhere like over there. And you can see the affected area are shown in the selection preview. So I kind of like that, but still it looks a little bit too, still a little bit too sharp for me, and I want to make it a little bit more cinematic and more softer, so to say. I could use a diffusion filter right in the front of the chain and select one of the presets, but I kind of default and always use I kind of find myself always using this particular tool here. It's called the telecine net, and it's kind of like softening your image down a little bit, and it looks a little bit silky if you pay attention to the shadow area. I don't know what it's actually doing, Simon. Perhaps you can talk a little bit after that. But I really like this tool. It gives your image a little bit of more oomph, so to say.
Absolutely.
It has character.
It has character. It's essentially trying to do the process that you would when you put that same particular type of filter on the front of the lens. But I just want to do a side comment. This is really interesting, that the way that you're talking us through this, Max, because there are so many ways to do grading. And one of the other things that we wanted to share is, what if you don't have Resolve, or what if Resolve isn't part of your workflow? How can you get the most out of your camera footage?
Exactly.
And also, how can you do this more quickly? How can you do it in a method that is creative? And so we in none of these sessions do we suggest that this is the definitive way to do something. We're just talking about all the different ways you can do something, and we make a joke about
approach, yes,
for a reason. But in this particular case, two things are really apparent to me. One is that you are simulating with the color blend this kind of control that you have over the raw controls of that footage, and also that you are not stacking up filters onto a clip. So often we stack up a number of balancing filters, and then if we want to adjust something else, you have to remember which one it is that's balancing and then go back to that. And that process of thinking about the pragmatic nature of how filters process in the stack takes you out of that creative brain mode. So to be able to do it in this one area where you're thinking about the creative aspect at the same time that you're balancing it, I think is a nice way to actually be thinking about the story behind a shot. But the other aspect is that if you're working in a team and then you want to try out a few ideas for a grade, let's say you're an editorial and you're working with the color department, then there are workflows that you could send this preset, for example, to your colorist, and they can use it on a node in Resolve and have all the access to that wide gamma output that you can put. You're not clipping the image. I mean, in this particular case, you probably have to limit it to sRGB because of the way that you've got the workflow set up in Premiere. But it does open out the capability of doing this as a much wider production. We're in a team. So I think you've managed to compartmentalize several different disciplines in here, as well as showing us how to manipulate this creatively. So it's a really interesting workflow.
Yeah, definitely.
So
as a side, sorry, can I just jump in a second? As a side comment, we might ask you in a second, Brian, about the merits of adding a filter before you go into post. So you're affecting everything in before you shoot it and afterwards. You could probably tell our reaction what that might be, but that's just an interesting little conversation to get into. Sorry, Max, go on.
So yeah, since I'm outputting the footage into Rec 709 anyway, and as you can see, there are a lot of details clipping. I mean, if you have HDR monitor, perhaps you can see the details on the highlight area, but since I don't, and I just want to output it into Rec 709, I will just limit the data by just using shoulder. And as you can see, before the shoulder, the highlight kind of like very obvious there and obnoxious. And it's a little bit it's toning it down and making it, broadcast safe.
And really fast. And really fast.
And really fast. But it still bothers me. This area here still bothers me because it kind of like doesn't have saturations, and it just looks pure white, and it's not as saturated as the other area of the sky. So let me show you how can how do you call it, deal with that kind of issue. So to tackle that, I can use Colorista before looks. So before all the data has been processed by looks. So I will just use Colorista. And if you want it easy, you can just use either the highlight roll-off. In this case, it doesn't do much, or the highlight regions to reduce the highlight. But still, by just reducing the highlight, it looks desaturated to me. So what I'm gonna do is it's a technique that is using a keyer, Luma keyer, and you can do it in Resolve as well, really fast. But here in Colorista keyer, you can also do that, but just by using the lightness, and you can kind of select the brightest area, and you can adjust the affected area, and you can filter it out. I mean, feather it out. Sorry. So yeah, this is kind of like the white portions of this image over here is the area that is affected by the keyer. Now we'll just choke the matte a little bit and make it softer to blur the edges. And just like that, I have my key ready. And to do so, now if any adjustment that I'm doing now, it's just literally targeting the area in that key. And I can now use my highlight regions, put it down a little bit. So I'm in the 90 kind of line over here. And to add saturations, I can go to the gamma wheel, a mid-tone wheel, and add a little bit magenta there, and also in the highlight. And I'm pretty much done, but it looks way too obnoxious, and I can just reduce it.
Never obnoxious.
We love
It's
I can
always
just
a
reduce
creative
the
choice.
strength.
Yes.
character.
So that's how I approach this image. I mean,
Interesting.
it is really nice to work with this image. And yeah,
absolutely.
that's the raw image. And just another peek to another image that you know, that I have here. I will not walk you through like one by one here, like in every detail, but you know, just in the big pictures, the big outline. So here in this image, it's not a raw image, so to say. It's a log image, right, Tony?
It's
It was shot with
a ProRes capture, not a raw capture.
ProRes capture. Yeah. So just the same process like before. I established my looks inside Magic Bullet looks. And as you can see, I still use the color blend to target just the landscape. But first, I was using the colorista to kind of balance it a little bit. Okay, let me just turn everything off. So first, I was balancing it with colorista, and then I use Unity to unify all the blue hues in the image, and then I use Telesynonet, you know, my secret weapon, and I use color blend, totally default setup, but on the like very first at the image tool chain, and I use shoulder to just limit everything, and last I use vignette because a grade is not complete without vignette, right, Simon?
It's not a proper grade without it.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah,
And we
and
spend
after
all
that,
the money in the world to get rid of the vignette. I tell you.
It's a choice.
Reintroducing.
similar like before, I have I have like a very dark image here, so I just use colorista to just lift the black a little bit, the shadows.
Nice.
And then I use denoiser to remove all the noise. And let me just zoom it a little bit. So this is before denoiser, maybe go a little bit more. So this is before denoiser, and that is after denoiser. But if you can see in denoiser, there's a sharpening control. I don't want to sharpen my image before my other process, so I just turned my sharpening off. And to sharpen my image, I use renoiser right at the end of the chain. So after all the process and everything, I sharpen my image right at the end, and then I add grain after the sharpening. So I'm not sharpening my grain. So that's literally it.
Excellent.
yeah,
The
that's my
pretty noise, not the bad noise. We want
That's yeah, exactly.
good noise. Exactly.
Awesome.
This is interesting in terms of that particular workflow, and there's a couple of comments. Dexter's asking something that we're delving into more next week, which is what is the difference between ProRes and raw capture. So in fact, those probably are two good things that we could wrap up with, because I'm just keeping a look at the time. It's a long 5 minutes that we've overrun, isn't it? But
I know, right?
two things that have come up on the questions which I think are quite interesting. And so what I might ask you in a minute, Tony, is just give us your 60-second take on the difference between the raw capture and ProRes, because it's something we're definitely covering in more depth next week. But just before we do that, Brian, what's your take that I teased before on adding a filter? Like Telecinnet is technically inside Magic Looks, it's softening the darker areas, the low luma values. But what would you suggest in terms of putting filters on the end of a lens?
So I guess this is it depends. How's that an ambiguous answer?
Wow.
We say it all the time. Don't worry.
So if you're a DP or you're shooting this and you have a certain look and feel, but at the end of the day you're just handing your footage off, and you want to try to keep some of that look and feel to your image without the colorist taking liberties, nobody would do that. Then I would say use your filtration to your advantage and kind of bake in a certain type of look. If the, in theory they're paying you to create that certain look and feel and shoot the footage, and if that's what the client's paying you for, it baking it in helps ensure that. Now if you're working with somebody and you're working with the production, and you have a good work and feel, I think, to be honest with you, I think, leaving the filtration off and letting the colorist, if you have a say into it, and to preserve that look, I think that's the great way to do it, because it gives you so much more options instead of just baking it in. I think there's a happy medium between it. In a perfect world, I would, perfect world, you go shoot some test footage, send it to the colorist, they come up with a look for it, and that's the LUT that you're going to use for that footage. And am I wrong? I mean, and then you what everybody's kind of working from the same page. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah.
But we all know we don't all work in perfect worlds. So
I'll say one thing. There are two options usually, and especially if you're doing ProRes, there's the baked in option, right? And then there's the sidecar method. So a lot of cameras will allow you to just toggle on a monitor LUT, and then use the monitor LUT versus, baking that into the footage. So, and with Blackmagic Raw, it will actually travel with that LUT as well as a part of it. And I want to say with R3Ds as well. But you can always have that sidecar method where you're just toggling on the button, and maybe you have a client monitor and they're watching it with the monitor LUT on, so then they can see contrast. But if you're shooting some, I can't remember exactly, I think it was Skyfall, it was one of the Bond movies was shooting with the Alexa, and they were shooting all ProRes, and they went with just ProRes instead of RAW, just so they can save money in the storage, which is very unconventional. But I remember that being a thing. I think it was on that podcast, the Australian guys, the RC, which used to be called Red Center.
So mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's so the whole idea is have the flexibility when you're doing something that's not raw. If I were to choose, the files that I would like to have in post, I'd rather they have 8 handles versus 2, So you have the raw file. Now I give that to the colorist and they can just do whatever. And I can actually, if I really want to kind of convey the idea down the line, then that's when you can make little ProRes rips that are dailies that you can say this, with the baked in LUT that you can send. But I always prefer the sidecar method, to where I can toggle it on, see how
Yeah.
it is, expose for it properly, and then you know, later they're still getting this flat file, especially if I'm in ProRes and not in RAW. So I think sidecar method versus baked in method. And if you have to do a baked in method, then I go flatter, just toggle on a monitor LUT and go that method versus.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I will add something really short, is that all of that techniques that you use like on set and about that filters, bring it to post. Don't forget it there. Bring it to post, and we can recreate it. That will make your image richer. And I'm sure Simon goes through that with that tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. In fact, we better wrap things up because it's 90 minutes is a long hour, isn't it? So,
I thought we were going for 2.5. So
there's so much stuff to share in these things. By the way, just very quickly, the image page I've got on my screen is just a bit more information. If you were wondering about what some of the Red Giant tools do, there's a great kind of help area. And just on this particular page, which is the film tools for Magic Bullet Looks, right down the bottom here, we've got information about TeleCineNet, and it just tells you what it's doing. In this particular case, how it's adding a silk effect to soften the blacks. But what I wanted to also, there you go. So that's how you can find out more stuff about it.
There you go, Max.
I obviously didn't read that.
If only there was a place where you could find it out. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
Sounds like Max is like me in Photoshop. What does this slider do? Woo!
it's
Very
great.
good
It's
job.
an awesome slider. Yes.
Good.
So but of course, in a session like this, we can't answer every particular thing, and we're not trying to, but we kind of overran, so we're sort of trying to at the same time. If you've got any follow-up questions about anything that we've talked about, or if you got some questions for Brian, please let us know. training@maxon.net comes to us. And also don't forget to visit the home of the Cine lenses as well. There's loads more information on that. And I believe, Brian, you've got some public sessions from time to time, so this is a good place to find out about them, isn't it?
Yes, so we have an office in Burbank, pretty much dedicated, you know, to the cinema lineup, but all of our still lenses are there. We have a showroom. Even when during COVID, we're open right now by appointment only, but if you want to come check some lenses out and you're in the LA area, it's a great resource. It's a beautiful showroom. When things get a little bit more opened up, we try to do monthly, bi-monthly type of events at the space. So we try to make it a resource for everybody. And those events aren't just around lenses. You know, we do lighting. We'll work with the, Black Magic Collective and some different type of things to get some varied type of stuff in there. So just try to be a good member of the filmmaking community in general. So
good
Fantastic.
networking place as well too. You meet a lot of like-minded people there.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Nice.
You probably see Tony there over time.
Yeah.
Who knows?
If there were a holiday party, I might be there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hopefully,
So,
when things get back to a little bit more normal. Absolutely.
Yes, fingers crossed. Absolutely. If you want to watch the recording for this session, head over in, I don't know, a couple of hours, and we'll have it uploaded. Maxon Training Team, just search for that on YouTube. And also, don't forget that we've got more sessions coming. We've got, if you go to the events area on maxon.net, then you see more information about the things that are coming up. And next week, we'll be diving into more of the traditional grading process, where we're looking at Resolve and Premiere. And thanks, Molly, by the way, for your lovely comments. Molly says that she'd love a whole session with Max about color grading in Premiere and getting into even more depth. Well, your wish is granted. That's what we're doing next week. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you again to everyone. Thank you for all your efforts and your hard work, Tony, for running around and pointing the camera at stuff, every day, it seems. Thanks, Diego, for all that wonderful. Yes, exactly. And all that wonderful metadata, all those Resolve workflows, and thanks, Max, for that creative excellence. That's going to be really interesting to see next week. And especially thank you so much, Brian, for generously sharing all those things. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
All right, take it easy, everyone. Thanks for the kind comments that you've been sending in.
It's been fun. Bye.
All right, take it easy.